I'm just going to invite Andrew, Michele and Ben and Pip Crawford as well up to the stage for a little, it's not really a discussion, but it's just an opportunity because we've got...
Better chair, Andrew.
Yeah, thank you.
Take the one, Andrew.
I guess like 4 experts that have been working in budding and orchard management for decades of experience between them all in different spaces as well. It's really cool to have 2 nurseries up here, and we have Brenton in the room as well as a 5th panelist that's in the room. So I just wanted to create an opportunity for anyone to ask any questions. I know sometimes, I know that I feel like I have a lot of silly questions because I don't know much about pistachios yet. But for those of you that have had like a little bit of experience or a lot in, I think surely you've got something that you want to ask these 4 people. But to start us off, I was wondering for the nursery owners, because CMB and we've run a nut company, is there any advice that you want to give to growers? I guess, like I think it was in Andrew's presentation, he mentioned contacting 12 months out and making your expectations really clear. So is there anything that you want growers to know in dealing with nurseries, if that makes sense?
You go.
Okay.
I think now, because we are talking about grafted trees, grafting in September for a tree.
Okay. Yep.
For a tree that will be planted into the ground in the not the following winter, but the winter after that.
Okay.
Yeah. We typically keep enough seed on supply now to be able to take someone's basically if an order's provided in March, April, we'll start germinating through winter and then plant out come October. But every nursery is a little bit different with their needs and their cycles. But obviously the earlier you get in, the easier it is for us to work with you to grow the tree. From our experience, we dispatch on a minimum of 4 mil. That's Andy and I have gone back and forth many a time about the size of a rootstock tree. I think the difference, and as Michele alluded to, it's a 2-year process for a budded tree, and it's in a pot, so it's root bound. It's different to almonds, which are healed and in the ground, so that root system is bound, and so you're always limited by the growth that you can get in a nursery because you're growing it in a pot versus the field where you've got obviously more as much control from a weather perspective, but you've got more growing space. So it's a challenge when you look at pricing of a budded tree versus the potential cost of that tree for a year. It's expensive to grow a tree in the nursery in a pot, especially a budded tree where you've got you've got loss and not everything takes. You'll know better than me, I've really struggled to get budded trees to grow well in pots. Chisels have done a lot better job than us. But at the end of the day, it's a 2-year cycle, whereas you can grow a tree in the field. But I just think you can't compete with that. So it is. There's pros and cons to both, but you just got to work what works for you, and not only from a cost perspective, but from a time perspective, and work out, and then work with the nursery to get what you need and manage those expectations. But we know with everything going right, a small tree, and everyone has different demands too. Some people prefer a big tree. There's some people prefer a little tree that's growing. Some people prefer a tip tree, others not. So there's just so many things to work with, and we obviously have our standards that we communicate pretty clearly to growers now. But everyone's a bit different. So, but definitely getting on the train early helps us just plan and try and get the best tree and product out there.
Can I ask a silly question?
Yep.
Of the nursery people. So we always do healed in almonds. So, have we ever tried, have they ever done that with pistachio and then cut them and dug and cut?
Yeah, you tried it early on,
You've
didn't
done
you?
some.
We've tried some, yeah.
We've done a few, like a handful.
Yeah.
Does
I'm not sure your question got heard.
So with a lot of other trees, so they're all done in pots. So it seems to me that some of our problem is the pot. We've got to try and grow up for 2 years in a pot. So, you know, we've got a limited thing. So in a lot of other crops, of course, we put them into ground and we do the field nursery and we can then dig them and prep them and they come in as a bare rooted, effectively, tree. That's what almonds do. And I'm just wondering whether we've ever tried that. And if we have, what was the success or lack of?
I reckon there was a nursery in America that only used to do that, so that was only how they supplied trees healed. We've played around not so much with rootstocks but with replants. So we've tried it and where we've actually used the same tool as an almond nursery to heal those trees. It needs to, in our experience, it needs to be done in winter when they're dormant. The rootstock's extremely tolerant to dry and wet, and they all hate having roots exposed, but they're very sensitive when a scion is attached. Like, it's just a different tree. When there's a scion, they absolutely hate it.
Our experience is that pistachio's root system are less fibrous than an almond root system, and it seems to be more sensitive to drying out. And we just know from experience of transplanting 1-year-old trees, if you let them dry out at all, you're in strife. Where almonds are a lot more forgiving. They can put 50,000 trees in the back of a truck.
Leaving a cool room for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Pistachios don't tend to, are not really happy with that type of treatment, which I guess is why the industry's evolved the way it has.
So typically when we do replants in winter, we're similar to Andrew. We will plant some extra trees and then replant any in winter just to try and get that uniformity come year 2. But we make sure we do it in June, July when the trees are dormant. We find they are really sensitive after sort of, probably latest would be September that would do it. And they probably will sit for a year, like they're that sensitive. So planting them is key.
And you dig your new hole, take the tree and plumb it straight in.
Yeah, with some fertiliser and water it in.
That's
so
the
it
difference,
gets,
isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and it's got dirt around it. We've done some where because if we're selling them to customers, we'll drench them and get all the soil off, obviously. And they're okay, but Anthony, you've had some of those, haven't you? How'd they go?
They just, they
don't love it. Yeah, they sit.
For 12 months.
Yeah.
And after then
they're fine. Yeah, that's our experience too.
Okay.
Growing them in a pot is a much better option. Yeah.
Okay. Force them into dormancy.
Carla, when you're budding, you use a tape. Now, I'm not really familiar, but with the dried ones, you cut it off and lay it on a flat base, do you? Or do you put it in a tea?
The bud, for the budding?
Yeah, the bud.
You can put a tea only if you have a decent size rootstock. Like I was saying before, if it's too small and you put a bud in, you crack the bark. In that case, if it's too small, you do like a chip and you are on a flat base of the rootstock.
On a flat base.
Correct.
And then you use the plastic budding tape?
The tape, yes, it's a plastic, but it's some kind of flexible.
Yes.
And you bend it around, a lot of pressure, you need to leave the bud out of the tape because it will start to push.
Yes.
And it's a tape that doesn't break down itself. You will need to cut it later on, it just stays on.
Similar to what the old budding tape used to be years ago?
Yeah, correct. We don't use that, only with the normal wood, we don't use that flexi band because it does break down very quickly and we still need the tape to hold together the buds for a little bit longer.
But the plastic gives it a better seal?
Well, even the band, if you go over, you give you a very good seal, but it doesn't last that long. You want it to last a little bit longer than the band.
So I've got a question. If a plant has been in a pot for 2 years and it's followed, the pot's a bit good pot, the roots have gone down, it's bunched up on the end, how much of that ought to be removed before?
That's not a
you plant
question
it?
for me,
Otherwise you've got a big
yeah.
bunch of roots coming out from the bottom of the
Yeah,
pot.
if it's root bound.
Yeah.
I've never removed roots. We may fluff them, like just try to pull them out a little bit just so that they're not intertwined. But I mean, we use pots in the nursery that are root growing pots, so they do try to have ridges on the inside of the pots that direct the roots down. So typically even a 2-year-old tree will still have stronger roots, but it will still have downward growing roots versus what we used to see with that real clumpiness. But we've never trimmed roots. I don't know your experience. We don't fluff anymore either with a 1-year-old tree. We just put it in. The less disruption we find, the better.
I think
Yeah, I've never heard it as well.
Yeah, I'd say that I think experience there is the less disturbance, the better with the pistachio. Live with the risk, I think, Martin, of getting it pop down.
falling,
Yeah,
yeah.
I don't think it's going to do that. I think it'll sort itself out pretty well.
Kelly, there's a photo that's appeared on my Facebook feed that I think is attributed to your company.
Yep,
With the furrows that are running alongside the tree,
yep,
full of water.
yep.
Could you talk us through why you've taken that approach and what's been the impact on, when you do it to start, and
Yep.
what's been the impact on the growth?
Well, why we took that approach was working pretty well for that property, very heavy soil, no power to that property in particular. It was the best way to develop the particular setup, but it's also for us to develop with that system was probably the most cost effective, especially just after COVID when the supply everything was pretty much a disaster, was a very good way to do it. And it's working pretty well. You see the trees from, I think that's the third year on that photo. It's working pretty well. So trees seems to be doing fine, and yeah.
And is it using a lot of water?
Not much because it's all recirculated, so you push up the water through the furrows and then you go to do the next bay down. So the whole farm has been lasered, every bay is lower than the other one. At the bottom there is a dam, so the last bay drop into the dam, and then from there you got a pump with the recirculation that you can put back into the system. So,
And will you retain that system through the life of the tree, or is it something that you'll phase out?
you never know what happened, but I think at the moment it's working better than what I thought, and I will say so as it is now. One issue that with another crop we have an issue to water down deep just before heat waves and so on. With that system we were able to water the whole profile, and so far, well, we haven't got much rain till 5 mil yesterday. We have done 2 irrigation from the start of the season, so in terms of water we haven't used that much yet. The last 3 years obviously it was raining all the time, a different story.
But those trees are 4 years old, correct?
Until the 4th year, yes.
Do you have contract budding services as well at Merbein?
Yes, we do have to say that we are fully booked for this season, really.
Yeah, okay.
Is a fairly high demand thing.
Yeah.
We do actually bring people from Europe to do the budding, because if something was coming from our time with the walnuts, it's a very particular skills. So we did come across people from Serbia and then from Albania, so we regularly bring in here from October to March. And they were doing other crop and then we moved to pistachios. But for us, there was a massive difference between having someone like these people that do all sorts of stone fruits back in their own country with grafting and so on, and someone that doesn't really have the skills. There was a massive difference, the strike rate. And it's worth for us the pain of doing all the visas process that is terrible and brings them in the country and so on. You definitely see the difference. So.
Michaeli, what do you think? I know you've got budding trees, and I know Cheslets have got budding trees that you use in the nursery and they do field work, and there's a couple of other budding contractors around at the moment. But what do you think the capacity? Do you have a feeling for what the budding capacity of the industry is? If someone came out and said, "I want to plant 1,000 hectares next year," could you get could the industry get the trees budded on time?
Yeah, I was talking that with Ben before. Look, for us, it's difficult. I was talking about the scalability of the budded trees in the nursery, okay? But if you think about the scalability even of the rooster, because you can plant 1,000 hectares or whatever, but you cannot bud them as quick. So a team of 2 for us is able to do 1,500, 1,600, 1,700 trees in a nursery environment. We can do 1,000 in an orchard environment because always there is all that work in the sun. So yes, we can bring in more people, we can do it, but for us to do it in the nursery is a lot more scalable because it's all a confined environment and it's all done there.
Yeah.
The magic number, I don't know what is the magic number to answer your question, but I think if you confine that operation to a nursery and you leave the farmer just to do farming or nursery business, I think is what the farmer want to do the farmer and the nursery does the nursery job.
And you say that in the US a lot, I mean, they're huge. Pistachios are massive. We're just a little ant in comparison. A lot of the nurseries have moved to fully budded stock being supplied on mass scale. Now they maybe don't have the same labour issues that we have and can train them up, but it's pretty common practice for them from a nursery perspective. So.
I had another question for McKinley.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
It's like
It's just up to you talk amongst yourselves. So I've noticed when you've got a budded tree out of nursery, it's quite low.
Yep.
Now, is that because that's the size you could get a bud into?
Depending how big is your stock from the previous year. Yeah.
So
there was 2 photos in my presentation. There was one that was probably this height, and one that I'll show you later was lower. Depending on the stock they use. And obviously you need to go, when you go to do budding now, in spring you're using the stock from the previous year. So if you sold all your bigger stock, because there was some customer that wanted to go and you kept your lower stock for yourself, it's always very difficult to plan 2 years ahead. But in the case of that small trees, obviously we kept the small stock for ourselves last year, and we grafted now. But because we want to graft it early to get a tree, you need to go down to match the size. You cannot graft on the tip.
Do you think there's any risk with planting with that graft union close to the ground from a rot perspective or anything like that? Like, do growers need to be aware that they need to keep that union out of the ground?
I think you want at least 100 mils out, and then obviously your tree needs to grow enough to get your branching starting from here or whatever. You don't get you don't use any of those lower buds. So, and if you need to keep it in the nursery another year, it's always an option. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's what I thought was the case. So you're budding where it was big enough.
Will that affect? See, when it comes to shaking time, does that affect because we're not shaking on the actual rootstock, or we're shooting on the slime, if that makes sense? Because it's so much lower. Is that going to affect the bark?
Not really. We've got old parts of our orchard. We've got trees were budded just above the ground level, so they get harvested every year on the above the root, above the bud union, and it doesn't seem to be an issue.
I'd say just the main thing is make sure it's low or high, not where your shaker goes, because you cannot, like shaking on a union, you'll either you'll bark that tree, damage the pads, or just get really crap. You won't get a shake. It just doesn't shake properly.
You've got the same thing, haven't you, Ian? You've got all sorts of positions.
In the old orchard, we find that if you can shake on the rootstock, it is a better grab.
Okay.
Because we do both all the time.
Yeah, which is why you've gone to that higher bud position. I think Ingrid's done the same thing.
For those people that have an old orchard, with the 3-branch primary sort of setup, you have that with a low union as well. You've got a lot of trouble, haven't you? Because
you've got to
primaries are too low as well. So we've had to go through and take a lot of those out and go to the next setup.
Okay.
Grow a whole.
Grow another tree, effectively. Yeah. Okay.
Ian?
I was just wondering if Andrew could run us through the modified central leader training of that, please.
Which year? Year 1, 2, 3?
Yeah, it's just how high you. Just the whole process, really.
we aim to prune the rootstock, prune the sign at 1.4. The following year we let that grow. In the second winter we aim to prune the primaries at about 400 to 500, maybe even 600. We might 4 to 500.
So you just grow a tree at 1.4,
1.4 and
cut
have
it
it
off,
off.
that's it.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Andrew, why aren't you going higher? But why 1.4?
We were guided by Brian Kempf and a grower, Jeb Hedrick, who went 100% modified central leader in the middle of the San Joaquin Valley in California, and that was the standard that they grew. I think there's a case to go even higher. I've seen very good results out of that, but I wouldn't go anything below 1.4.
Yeah, we've played around with that.
The reason being,
1.6,
when you had the old height, which was 41 inches in the old money or sort of hip height, between that and where the amount of room you need to get the harvester in, you've only got about this much room. So you can only grow 3 primaries within about this much room. But if you head the tree up here, you've got a lot more opportunity to grow more primary structure. Yeah, you can.
We've gone higher before, so
there's
we've
no
played around with
reason
it.
What I mean is you got to, when you cut it, I came on 1.5 when I started the same as CB with the central leader. Only reason because it was level with my nose. But then you got,
So if you're any taller, we have a problem.
Then you got that arm right, and you've got to tie that other arm up so you keep that central leader
Couldn't
going.
reach it.
Right?
Yeah.
So why not just
We've
higher?
done that
Yeah, that's
before,
right.
so and it's the way that no prune is. They just grow the tree and don't touch it, and it will branch. I mean, you see that in those photos of when you haven't tipped the tree, it'll start throwing out its laterals. What I find is we played around with that. It was like, I'm going to tip it at 1.8, and because they're so apically dominant, you get growth up top, and you actually don't. You get sort of blind spots down below. Now they seem to fix themselves over a few years. They'll just look a bit funny in the first few years, but by year 5, 6, you're probably fine.
Then there's a lot more wind up there too.
Yeah,
Low.
definitely. But I just, I think the way that I've always looked at modified central leader is layering the tree, and I think that's where that tipping height helps you layer the tree. So by tipping it, you then layer your primaries. You tip it again in second year, you layer your secondaries and then your primaries up here. And so it's sort of like a bit of a Christmas tree approach that kind of builds itself up from the ground up, and you'll see your strongest branches are down here, and then it slowly builds itself. Because if you get really dominant limbs, and Brian's a big one for this up top, you get rid of them, and it's really hard to do.
Well, you got to cover them.
Yeah.
Keep that
If it's
central
the same,
leader.
if it's the same girth as the.
I think seeing yours and seeing Andrew's and everything else, I think as long as you've got a pretty much a plan, I was saying, I mean, if it's 1.4, 1.5, whatever, the beauty of the modified central leader system is you choose the next central leader. If it's 1.4 and you send another one up, you've still got that opportunity.
But you've got to
Then you go
try and
again.
keep that central leader going.
Yep.
That's the only reason I'm saying is go to 1.8, because you have to spend time and go and tie that other one up to keep the central leader going.
I think if you went 1.8, and this was our experience, you have too much and you get really short. It doesn't layer
Takes a
the
while.
tree as well as, we like
Did you
it.
train the second one though? Because Andrew was firstly saying he just cuts it off to 1.4 and that's it.
Yeah.
That's what you said,
and
didn't
then in year 2 you'll bring up a central leader.
And tie it.
And tight.
So you do, then
You'll bring up another leader.
600.
We'll prune that at 600
Yeah.
above the first cut.
And you
Do
know,
this
I
for
think
2
the
or 3
philosophical question that Peter asked is why is it 1 point whatever it was? And the answer is that's the way that it was first guy, Jeb Hendricks, did it in California. And we followed that. In fact, the logic of where Peter's going is also correct. There's now within California an interesting debate going on as to which way that goes. There's now a trial which has now been going for 8 years by Bruce Lampion, who came out and addressed PGA meetings, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago. And what they're showing is the no prune model, which I think you're using at Leeton and the guys are using it at Pyambi, which in fact Bruce has shown to date in his 8-year study. Just hang in for the next couple of years, you'll never know. But if you just let it grow, I mean, it's a willow tree, and it can look pretty ugly, and you can get really scary in about years 2, 3, 4 as whether it's what it's going to do. But if you have a look at these trees by 5, 6, they look like a lovely pistachio tree.
We were 2 weeks ago and seen an exact example with Bruce.
Right.
He actually had a time-lapse camera where he took a photo every day over the process.
Yes.
And
Right.
actually showed these trees, and you put them next to the main central leader of a completely modified tree. The trees were nearly exactly the same and producing more nuts.
Yeah, what Bruce's results are to date in terms of yield and early yield, which at the end of the day is what actually we're all interested in. Pistachios are a monstrous investment, and you don't see a razoo for a long time. Now, if you can see that razoo sooner, everyone's happier. And no, they don't.
No.
Amazingly enough,
Trees actually, when they got the fruit on the time-lapse cameras, they all seemed to think that the branches were starting to sag, but on the time-lapse cameras, the actual branch was pulling themselves up, even though the load was getting bigger.
Yeah.
So the tree actually adapted to what was growing on it and grew more structurally sound. And
you're not topping it at all, are you? You're just letting it grow. Well, doesn't it get all this weight up here and then the state?
no.
we've got some at the moment that are, getting 200 or 300 mil above our state, and they're starting to wander a little bit, but we're starting to see more laterals push off already. So.
What Lampion's research has shown is the no prune modified central leader compared with conventional pruning. Basically, they are 1 year in front of each other on the yields.
That's right.
Right, and when you get to about year 9, they're all about the same.
Exactly right.
So where the advantage of this non-pruning,
Which is the 10 mil fiberglass.
what
It's about 1.8 at the top of it.
Sort of gives the tree its own stability, they say, because it's actually got a little bit of
Good for it to sway.
It gives it the tolerance for the wind and it finds itself.
Very, very interesting study that he's doing, and actually showed that over 80 hectares there was something like 120,000 cuts done, on a conventional training method. Central leader method, we were looking at about 80,000 cuts. So the labour involved in doing all them cuts compared to doing none at all and still getting the same result, getting a yield early, and the tree structure was exactly the same.
I think this is a debate that's really only started 15 years ago. Conversation in total only started 15 years ago. There was massive resistance to it in California in the first place. And in fact, I think a couple of years ago, there were more modified central leader trees in Australia than there were in California.
Bob B didn't like the idea.
Bob B, he's now stopped opposing it.
Has he?
Yeah, he's not in favour of it, but he stopped opposing it. No, he didn't. And there's a lot of common wisdom in California against it, but it's getting some grounds. But I think this is a discussion and a debate, and I think we all should go and read Bruce Lampion's research. Very interesting, very well done. It's a University of California study. It's been, proper scientific methods, all sorts of statistical analysis which is done properly. And I suspect over time we will change the way we're doing it. And what they're doing at Pyambi, I think, is will be out there for field days. There'll be a pit group there soon. Don't worry. And we're looking.
How's Andrew's tree no prune go?
Yeah, I've got a small patch which I haven't done any pruning on, but it's interesting getting the perspective of Jeb Hedrick. When I was in the States last year, he was one of the major growers that Brian worked with to get modified central leader. And Bruce did all his original trials of zero pruning on Jeb's farm. And Jeb's now...
Bruce's site is Jeb's father's
Yeah, well, Jeb's father, Jeb,
Yeah,
same. Jeb's of the opinion that there's a point between the modified central leader and the zero prune. That's sort of where I tend to land at the moment. We've cut back on the amount of pruning we do, even on where we started doing the modified central leader. But I think there's a median point between complete zero prune and the modified central leader that we started back in 2016.
As young as what ours are at the moment, I can see exactly what you're talking about already, because it's starting to look that little bit scraggly, you know, you're not getting a lot of structure about them, so it is a bit of a worry where, you know, a little bit of tweaking may do it off. But,
yeah,
you know,
I think there's a...
Bruce being done, I see, you know, a lot of confidence in how thorough that Bruce was about what he did to handcuff with his theory. I think,
Bruce showed you the photos when they were 2 and 3 and 4 years old.
Yeah.
They look like shit.
Amazing, yeah.
No, they look like shit anyway. It doesn't really matter if you prune them or not. They're in that age. The only thing I would say on no prune with Kerman versus Saura, Saura is a naturally willowy variety. It does not have that natural upright structure that Kerman has. So it's probably the only thing to watch with.
Kerman's better suited to it than Saura.
Saura tries to go downwards before it goes upwards. It's frustrating sometimes.
Is there any place for tying limbs up?
It's yours, Andrew.
It's incredibly expensive, and since we've been doing the modified central leader, we make a conscious effort that we don't tie, because it's sort of like once you start doing that, you've got to keep it up. And I like to just prune the tree or do whatever we need to do to the tree so it supports itself rather than, I mean, some growers in the US spend thousands of dollars per hectare using 3 8-inch rope to support the branches of 6, 7, 8-year-old trees, and that's with the more upright variety that we grow. So I don't think I would prefer to cut either by hedging or whatever to create the structure that you want rather than supporting it with a piece of rope.
With Saura, if you conventionally prune it, I guarantee you will use ropes or you'll spend a lot of money picking up dead branches that have snapped. Right? The big motivation that we went to modified central leader was from the arborist who came up with the concept with respect to pistachios, was all about the way, and I can't explain it to you, but the way branches form is if you crotch them and go for primaries, you create an automatic weak spot in that joint and you'll just get this branch snapping. Now, the modified central leaders, there's none of those trees anywhere in the world old enough, pistachio trees out in the world, old enough to find out whether modified central leader branches are going to snap. If you listen to the arborists and the explanation about the way that join they will not. They do it differently, and you can see the difference between them and why they won't snap. And that's why I finally convinced him to go away from modified central leader. I got to tell you, that wasn't easy. He wasn't quite Bob Beattie, but you know, he didn't. Mate, you planted Delta Stage 1 as modified central leader, and then you finally...
I remember one time when me and CV started the central leader, and you didn't believe in it.
No, he didn't. I believed in it because David and I saw it together in California. So I think the conventional pruning, you're going to be into roping up trees because that's how we minimised the problem when we're doing conventional pruning. We minimise the breakage by tying the trees as 3 and 4 year olds to get them more upright. Sorry?
They put bolts. I'm talking about modified central leader.
Ah, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. Well, you couldn't tie them up because the way the branches are not in a unit. The shoots are not one there, one there, one there. You wouldn't be able to tie them.
We might just wrap up the panel discussion because we still have the lovely Maha to present on juvenile shoot dieback, and then there's food.
Can I say one thing on the budding?
Yeah, please.
On budding, preparation is key. Obviously, it is a restrictive point. It's the most critical, in my opinion, it's the most critical time factor in your training, in your development of your orchard. If you miss budding, you're playing catch up. Doesn't matter if it's 3 months, a year, whatever it is. So I just can't stress how important it is to plan, to get in touch with the contract budding service that you are using, if you are using one, Budwood if required, and really line that up, because it is such a finite window to be able to effectively bud your tree. And if you miss it, it will cause misuniformity in your orchard.
But it depends if that butter eats the phone.
I get that, I totally get that, but all I'd say is create that relationship, maintain that relationship. And also, it's not just, if something doesn't go quite right, it's a partnership. You know, you as the grower, you're growing the tree, you've got to make sure it's flushing, it's prepped, it's happy to really take that bud. It's not just, you know, one if that bud doesn't take, it's not necessarily that the bud hasn't gone in. There's so many factors, as Andrew and I'm sure Michaela covered in their presentations, that you know, count for that. So treat it like a partnership, and you'll get the results you need.
Awesome, thank you everyone. Just a round of applause.
Thank you.